Hello, Mordrim here. Today I want to show you Flicker Strike in Diablo 4. For this we are going to play a Shred Druid and really get into role-playing a werewolf. This one is going to come in two flavors, a regular chat one and a dire chat, a rare breed you can turn yourself into. Now this build is insanely fast. It kind of teleports you from enemy to enemy and has incredible sustain, as well as decent damage without going storm. It's a true werewolf build. I'll be presenting to you a no unique version of this build and can safely recommend it to anyone willing to become a bipedal monstrosity. You can find gameplay of both versions at the end of the video. First, a very quick overview. The footage you're seeing is on a level 85 Druid, doing tier 37 nightmare dungeons as well as hell-tide open world stuff. This is to also show you the functionality outside on your way to densely packed clubs. As for the features, the clear speed is insane. You also have nearly no downtime with little to no spirit generation issues. However, there is one drawback to all the fun. Going dire chat is only temporary, with a small window of regular play. This problem is solved through the inclusion of ravens and tentacles to help you with AoE and keeping enemies at bay. Cooldown reduction is also your best friend. And what about bosses? Those are also no problem whatsoever. Your sustain makes you nearly unkillable and you can even face tank the butcher at higher difficulties. Your damage outside of the dire phase is also pretty decent, but truly shines once you go super. Next I will quickly go over the gear, then the spirit boons, Skilltree and the Paragon boards at the end. There are multiple Paragon boards in the description box with one optimized for level 75, one for 100 with high level glyphs in mind, and there is also a setup with a non-unique version. So let's start with the helmet. For the helmet I'm going to show you something with cooldown reduction. The other stats on this one can be health, total armor, or ranks to Raven, ranks to Poison Creeper, life on kill. There's a lot of options. I have another helmet I want to show you guys. This one right here has maximum life, a ton of maximum life, ranks to Poison Creeper, total armor, but doesn't have the cooldown reduction. Cooldown reduction is essential for this build to function because we want as much cooldown reduction on our Grizzly Rage to have a higher uptime on this one. Another option for the helmet slot is something with stats, so intelligence or dexterity, very beneficial to us, but we always want the cooldown reduction on this one. As for the imprint, the damage reduction while shapeshifted one is very nice, especially on this build, since we are lacking defenses, so having 15% damage reduction is very nice. Next I'll go over the pants because there are two options here. With this one you can go the damage reduction heavy route, so total armor and damage reduction is your preference on your pants. And as for the imprints, the disobedience one gives you armor, stacking one. Armor is extremely strong in this game. It stacks additively, so there are no diminishing returns. You want as much as possible on your gear. You want as much as possible to your Paragon Board and Skilltree. There is no way you don't want armor. Armor is just exceptionally strong. However, there is another option here. You can go for Temerity. I don't have it. That's unique. That gives you a barrier whenever you heal. We heal a ton of health because we are critting and healing due to a spirit boon. So having this one on our pants makes it you cannot use disobedience on this one. We can then move disobedience to our chest, which also has a lot of damage reduction here, and life. Life is also very beneficial to us since we heal for percentages. But for the chest you can also use a different, unique Mad Wolf's Glee. Because Mad Wolf's Glee gives us 2 ranks to our werewolf skills, and since we are a werewolf and using constantly shred, we can get this one to rank 11. Now, Mad Wolf's Glee has a lot less damage reduction. It doesn't provide you with total armor, it doesn't provide you with health, so this one is a more offensive option. And you cannot use Temerity if you do, because you're going to lose one of your defensive aspects, and you really don't want to lose your defensive aspects. So next are the boots. For the boots I ran with spirit cost reduction because we want as much as possible. I also have spirit cost reduction on our amulet. Spirit cost reduction will make your shred fall under 30 spirit cost, and this one also stacks with the spirit cost reduction of the direwolf aspect, so this solves most of our resource generation issues. Keep in mind there's a Paragon node which enables us whenever we crit to regenerate 2 spirit per crit. So having less spirit cost will make it so you can sustain your spirit even without the dire werewolf form. Then you want movement speed. Flat movement speed is very important to have on this one because we get a lot through the dire werewolf form. We don't really want the on kill one for the elite on kill one because we're going to stack to 200% very fast and very efficiently with the, for example, Ghostwalker aspect that is also giving us 25%. So we get 38% through the aspect, 25% through the boots, also through the aspect. Then we get another 25% here, another 9% for the skill tree, and we are at 200%. I also have 20% on my amulet because I am currently not having a good time with rolling amulets. I would much rather prefer the cooldown reduction on this one. And there is another wild impulse rank up to this one. So I can show you the amulet right here that has this one. This one has +3 ranks to wild impulses, which is a damage multiplier on our passive tree. It's this one. This one has 3 points in it right now, but we can stack this one up to +6, giving us 30% increased damage. So the amulet has a few options here. So you can roll damage reduction, cooldown reduction, you can roll spirit cost reduction, you can roll movement speed if you prefer the movement speed. If you don't have 100% uptime on your Grizzly Rage, you're going to be slower if you don't have movement speed here. Ranks to wild impulses, there is a few very good things you can roll on this. Another thing I want to mention with this one, since this one has movement speed, we can theoretically drop the Ghost Walker aspect on this one and go with a unique. The Penitent Griefs, those give us a 9% more damage multiplier versus chilled enemies. We leave a trail of frost behind that chills enemies. So this one is nice on this build. Since we are always in melee range, we are always getting the 9% or 10%, up to 10% more damage. It has a movement speed roll that can go up to 26%, even probably higher. So the Ghost Walker aspect is not that important if you have those griefs and if you have movement speed on your amulet. So it's more of you can juggle between those. Next, since I already mentioned, we are now a dire werewolf with the previous aspect. We can use this one, so the rampaging werebeast one, increases the duration. This works on the dire were form. And critical strikes in this Grizzly Rage or the dire were form are going to increase our crit strike damage by 10% for the duration. This one stacks per crit and doesn't have a cap, so you can reach 10k crit strike damage with this one. It's completely insane. So if you are critting constantly, very small enemies like spiders or mosquitoes or bats or anything that comes in large quantities, you can run to a boss and one-shot the boss. Now as for the other stats on this one, attack speed is very nice to have. Crit strike chance, very nice to have. Despite the legendary weapon we are using, which is Waxing Gibbous, which gives us a 100% guaranteed crit strike chance after killing an enemy and entering stealth and back out. But this one also has a very short duration, doesn't work on bosses. So you want as much critical strike chance as possible on your other pieces like your rings and your gloves. The ranks to shred are also very important, gives us more damage. And as for the last stat, crit strike versus injured or stat increases like willpower, dexterity or intelligence are great. The strength one only gives us armor, so it's basically useless. Well, not useless since armor is good, but there are better options on this slot. Now, since I already mentioned the weapon, let's go over the weapon options. Waxing Gibbous is the unique option. It is very nice to have for clearing. It is also very fast attacking, so you're constantly dashing through enemies. However, there are better options for damage, especially versus bosses. For this one, I have one here, the Stormclaw Serrated Cleaver. It is 1 item power more, so 7 damage, but it deals a lot more damage versus bosses. We have 2 increases, core skill damage and damage to healthy enemies. You can also get damage versus close enemies on this one. We have 2 instances of crit strike damage and we have willpower on this one. And we can imprint shred on this one for a 60% more damage multiplier because it deals 60% lightning damage after crit to the target and surrounding enemies. Yes, we are attacking slower since we are using an axe, but this one improves our bossing massively. So there is the option of having a non-unique version of this build with a two-handed axe. Otherwise, put the shred on your totem, which also gives us cooldown reduction, crit strike chance, spirits cost reduction, willpower. So all the stats you can get on your accessories like or your jewelry, like your rings, amulet, even your helmet can roll on this one. Yes, there is an option to put the shred on your amulet like here, but I don't like this one since we are lacking spirit cost reduction. I don't want to worry about spirit cost. I feel like it's better to have it like this. We also get more movement speed, so I prefer it like this. But you can do the shred on your amulet and this one on the totem. As for your rings, go for crit strike chance, damage versus close, not distant, like here. Vulnerable damage, crit strike damage. All of those are great. You can also roll crit strike damage while in werewolf form, like on this one. And you can also find physical damage. Lightning damage is not beneficial to this build, but physical damage is great. We want as many increases to our damage as possible, so I would even prefer to have less crit strike damage and more increases like physical damage, damage to close. So those are essential for the build to scale because we are not getting as much on our tree, as much on our Paragon Board, as much on our gear. There is a lack of increases, flat increases. So this damage bucket is kind of empty. As for the imprints, this one gives us attack speed whenever we critically strike for our core skills, so shred. We have this one up constantly, a very strong aspect on this build. And the other one has damage while fortified. This one can get up to 40%. We are constantly full on fortify because of the direwolf aspect. It gives us 8% fortify per second. However, it's not always 100%. Whenever we get damage, we need to refill, and we also have the time when we are not in the dire werewolf form, but I still think this one is a very good option. Now I want to sum up what uniques you can get on this build. Waxing Gibbous for the main hand, but you can also go unique 3 with a two-handed option. As for the Greaves, you can go with the Penitent Greaves. As for the Pans, you can go with Teramity, or whatever that one is called, the one that gives you barrier whenever you heal, overheal. For the chest, you can go with the Mad Wolf's Glee. And there's also an option to go with the Stormwolf one. However, I personally do not like that because we are missing a lot of options outside of the direwolf form. We also miss out on damage reduction or the armor stacking one, and we cannot get cooldown reduction on the helmet. So I strictly think this build is a little bit better and more consistent since we are also getting cooldown reduction on this one. We can get 100% uptime on our form with this one, so I personally like it more. Next, let's go over the Spirit Boons. Wariness for the Deer for damage reduced versus elites. For the next one, the Eagle, there are 3 options. I am currently going with 18 Wrath, but I am thinking about switching to the 5% flat increase to our crit strike chance. Since we are lacking crit strike chance versus bosses, this one is more consistent to our damage output. The 30% increased crit damage is not doing us any favors at the moment since we are stacking so much crit damage already. I personally think the Scythe Talons are better. And there is the option of Iron Feathers for a 10% maximum life increase. This one is for hardcore specifically. It will increase your survivability a lot. So go for this one if you want more tankiness. As for the Wolf, go for Pack Leader. All our critical strikes have a 20% chance to reduce the cooldown of our companion skills to 0. So we are getting them up constantly. This one is very strong whenever you don't have the dire werewolf uptime at 100%. However, if you do have 100% uptime, Calamity is better, 25% extended duration on your ultimate skill, but it's not really 25%, it's 25 base duration increase. So this one has a 15 seconds duration and stacks up by 1 second per kill. But when we stack in Calamity, it's not the expected value, but only 2.5%, it's 25% of the 10-second base duration. The 5 additional seconds and the 5 additional seconds you get from killing enemies do not do anything for this one. So I personally prefer Pack Leader. And for the Snake, we're going for Masochistic because whenever we crit, we get life back. So we can sustain completely fine with this build without ever really needing to use our health potions. And Calm Before the Storm is nice to get our direwolf form back, but if you're capped on cooldown reduction, you can go with 2 points in the Eagle, so Scythe Talons for example, and Avian Wrath or Iron Feathers. Next I will go over the abilities. So for the builder I prefer to go with Storm Strike because we get an immobilize chance and vulnerable uptime. Vulnerable uptime is a damage multiplier, and we also benefit from the damage reduction we get from this one. So when we are outside of the dire werewolf form, so we are not complete trash. The other option is Claw because this one can be used in the dire werewolf form, but I personally don't like it. We are not going to use our Spender in the dire werewolf form. As for our core ability, go for Shred and Primal Shred. Primal Shred will make us dash, so this enables our Flicker Strike playstyle. We also get crit strike damage, which is nice to have. And we also get the Great Gate for 9% movement speed. We get 6% crit strike chance versus closed enemies, and Wild Impulses for a damage multiplier. In the next 3, go for Bloodhaul and Preserving Bloodhaul for a 15% increase to our attack speed for 4 seconds. This one should be up constantly. We can reuse this one, we can heal with this one. It's a very, very nice ability. The cooldown reduction comes from the next node, the Enhanced Bloodhaul. Whenever you kill someone with Bloodhaul, the cooldown is reduced by 1 second. Vigilance is also very nice to have. For 6 seconds we have 15% damage reduction. Since we are constantly using Blood Hall to get the heal and the attack speed, we also get the 15% damage reduction on this one. In the next 3, we want Call of the Wild for more companion damage, companion skill damage. Poison Creeper is a nice defensive tool. When we press this one, everything is immobilized, so it cannot move to us, cannot hit us. We also apply a very strong poison damage around them. This one has a 150% damage multiplier blocked behind this one, because this one increases the poison duration by 3 seconds from 2 seconds. So it increases the damage we deal with this one. It doesn't affect the immobilize, so keep that in mind. Another option is Brutal Poison Creeper. If you want 20% crit strike chance increase versus enemies. For this one, if you are running the unique less version, I would prefer the Brutal Poison Creeper, since we are not guaranteeing our crits through the unique. For the second ability in here, Ravens are very nice to have. They apply crit strike chance to enemies hit by them. This is nice versus bosses. And we get Ferocious Raven, which applies vulnerable when we cast this one. It deals quite a lot of damage, but we can open up the fight by waiting for the Raven to come down, hit them, and then we apply the vulnerable status for 3 seconds with the dot of our Ravens and of our Poison Creeper, and then we change to Direwolf form and clobber the enemy, clobber the boss. In the next one, we want to pick another Toxin for an 8% poisoned enemies are slowed, but most importantly, Envenom gives us 30% additional critical strike damage, and whenever we crit, we apply poison damage. This one is not that great, it doesn't provide us with that much damage, but every bit counts, especially when we crit for 1 million or 300k or 500k, this one stacks up to quite a decent number. In the next cluster, we want Grizzly Rage, max this one out, so we get Unstoppable, we get Supreme Grizzly for Fortify, and we can then move into this cluster, because whenever we fall out of Grizzly Rage, we want to be mobile, so reductions to control impairing effects by 6% will triple to 18% on this one. We can get this one up to 9%, so when we take out 1 point in Toxic Claws, I don't have the gold right now, we can put this one in Restrained, so we can get 27% reduced control impairing effects, which is nice, which is really nice to have. So when we drop out of our Grizzly Rage, we have the Fortify for this one, and we can combine this one with a Paragon Board feature that also decreases the duration of control impairing effects. So we don't really need Unstoppable outside of the range, so we can drop Earthen Bulwark, we don't need that as a defensive cooldown, and we are not constantly screwed by enemies that apply freeze. And for our keystone, Lupine Ferocity, whenever we hit an enemy and critically strike, this one stacks up, we get 6 stacks, and we can critically strike for additional 60% damage. So this one is a multiplier on that hit. Now this sums up the skill tree. Next I will go over the Paragon Board. For the Paragon Board starter, we want Exploit in this one. I know we don't apply Exploit all the time, but we have 2 instances of this one with our Ravens and this one. So we get more burst damage. We can just jump from enemy to enemy with another multiplier. So very nice to have in this one. I'm currently still lacking 1 node here for additional vulnerable damage. We then move to the Constricting Tendrils board. The nature damage for this one doesn't do anything, but we get quite a lot of health and we get a lot of dexterity on this one. I currently have this one maxed out at 49 dexterity. This gives us 73.7% crit strike damage with core skills. And we also get a multiplier. Whenever we critically strike, we get a 2% stacking damage debuff on our enemies, up to 12%. So that's why we pick this one, this cluster, just for this glyph. We then move to the Lust for Carnage cluster. This one will enable us to regenerate our spirit whenever we critically strike. So beeline this node. We can also get attack speed quite a lot on this one. We get access to this glyph slot. This glyph slot gives us a little bit more damage, a little bit more healing, because we heal for quite a lot already. This one stacks with our heal percentage increases. This one increases our survivability. And as for the glyph slot, whenever we are in werewolf form, close enemies take more damage from us. 12% is quite a lot, especially since we are only picking willpower here, so it's a very cheap glyph to take. Then we path through here to get Fleeting, because this whole cluster gives us 28% control impaired duration reduction. This one stacks with the one I previously showed you in the skill tree. So if you are not in your dire werewolf form, you are not unstoppable. So you want this one to have, so you are not constantly immobilized, constantly frozen. It's a very strong defensive node, and I highly recommend grabbing this one. Then we path through here to get werewolf skill damage and crit strike damage. There's quite a lot of crit strike damage to grab here. The next board we want to attach is the Inner Beast one. The Inner Beast one has a lot going for it that we want to utilize. We path through here to the glyph slot. For the glyph slot we want Outmatched. Outmatched provides us with an increase to our rare nodes, but it also increases our physical damage to non-elites and bosses. So we clear out trash faster, and we also clear out bosses faster. At the low level, this one doesn't have enough dexterity in the slot, but we get there once we get this board up and running. And why are we using this one here? The bonus to rare nodes seems to be wasted, right? But we get armor. A lot of armor. And we get willpower. The armor on this one is substantial and will decrease the damage you take by quite a lot, so you want to take this one. And we also get shapeshift skill damage. We are lacking increases to our skill damage, so this one is perfect for us since we are also getting a multiplier. This board also paths through a lot of armor nodes here and health nodes, and we get access to this node, tenacity, also armor and health. We can then path later through this one to get havoc, physical damage increased, crit strike damage increased, so a very strong cluster. But we can also path through here to get attack speed increases for dexterity. So the more dexterity we get, the better our character becomes. So that's why we want dexterity on our gear to get access to this one, because attack speed is very nice to have on this build. And the last board is only for a very specific legendary node, Heightened Malice. Whenever we poison 3 enemies nearby, we deal 45% more damage. That's a multiplier to all our damage. For bosses, it doesn't apply, but we can use our Poison Creeper, change into a Dire Werewolf, and start blasting. We still have a lot of points left. So what we can do is finish up this board by pathing through here. Those nodes provide us with armor, so they're not completely wasted despite all the poison resistance we can get here. This will allow us to get to this glyph slot. We can then go for all the damage to poisoned enemies, a little bit of dexterity here, and damage reduction versus poisoned enemies. As for the glyph you want to put here, anything that increases your damage per point, per dexterity, per willpower, per intelligence is very good for this build. So this slot, the last one we get, is going to utilize that fact. Like I already mentioned, you'll find 2 talent planners, one specifically for 75 and one specifically for level 100. So the optimized planner. And I will also provide another setup. So basically the setup will not change between the unique version and the non-unique version of this build, but the setup for your gear will. So expect to have multiple talent planners down below, and don't be confused if you see level 75 unique, level 100 unique, level 75 non-unique, level 100 non-unique. So those specifically are for the gear pieces, not the Paragon Board. And there will be changes to the skill tree for the non-unique version, like I already mentioned. Anyway, that sums up my build guide for the Flicker Strike Shredder. If you like this video, make sure to leave a like, sub and comment. Helps me out a lot, helps out the channel, helps out promote other builds, because we're finally getting there. There are werewolf builds coming out, there are lightning storm builds coming out, there are other types of builds than pulverized coming out. So I'm very happy about this. And I also try to include a non-unique version of this build just because uniques are damn rare. Like I haven't gotten a Tempest Raw yet, so I'm stuck basically with my Lightning Storm build. Try to do something else in the meantime until I get the Tempest Raw, because the Tempest Raw will improve our Lightning Storm build substantially. It will provide us with sustain because of the node here, so Lust for Carnage. So we don't have as many problems with our Spirit Sustain. Anyway, thank you for watching. Enjoy the gameplay. Bye.
Ready yet. I must wait a moment.